We're going to hit 11 o'clock in 5 seconds. So let me double check our audios are good. You can hear me well, Zaza?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me
Perfect.
well?
Perfect. We're on the dot. Let's get started.
Okay. All right. Well, how is everyone? We are so excited to have you here today, and thank you all so much for coming. This is our first time that we are hosting something like this, so we're kind of testing the waters here, seeing and gathering if this is something that is going to be of interest to you and to potentially students in the future. So thank you all for being here. My name is Zaza, and as we said before, this is my co-presenter Jolene, and we will be hosting the session today. So before we dive into the objectives for today, we would like to introduce ourselves in case you are not familiar with us. Both Jolene and I have very different backgrounds with regards to the nutrition field. So my journey to becoming a dietitian was rather non-traditional, I like to say. After graduating as an undergrad from UC Davis, I worked for about 6 years in a catering company in varying capacities. I was a delivery driver, a server, and then I worked my way up to an office manager, a food service manager, and then eventually an event manager. And simultaneously, while I was doing this, I was taking some science prereqs in my local community college because I got a BA in anthropology in undergrad. And I was kind of tinkering with the idea of becoming a dentist until I took a nutrition class. And it just opened my eyes. I fell in love with the field. And I ended up looking into programs, my local programs, got into USC's nutrition coordinated master's program, became a dietitian in 2021. So now I'm an adjunct professor at Merritt College in Oakland, which is actually where I took that fateful nutrition course that changed the course of my life. I'm teaching courses like food production systems and food service management. And then on top of that, I created this program, PrepTable Complete Program with Jolene, to support our RD2Bs in their RD exam preparation journeys.
Right. Well, I'm Jolene. Nice to see you all. Unlike Zaza, who is pretty much an expert for food service, I personally had a neuroscience degree before I got my master in nutrition. I was on that pre-med track back in the early 2010s. So going through clinical rotation, in and out of hospitals, in and out of OR, was my life for a really long time, which contributed to my expertise in MNT. And that's what I taught a lot during PrepTable. I was also a caregiver for seniors with dementia for 3 years, which allowed me to truly discover my passion in nutrition. During the pandemic lockdown, I personally taught weekly Pilates over Zoom. And that's how I discovered and developed my expertise in remote teaching. I love simplifying hard to understand concepts with my students. Since Zazan and I have established PrepTable, we have helped many students pass the RD exam. Most of our students passed on their first attempt. We've also helped other students who are repeat test takers to regain their test confidence and comb through their knowledge gaps. And in today's session, Zazan and I will be sharing many good tips with you on how to pass the RD exam.
So we anticipate the study session to go for about 50 minutes is what we think. But we are going to have a hard stop at noon. So please keep your mics muted for the time being, and we're going to try to save the last 10 minutes for general Q&A. Okay?
Perfect. So let's go over our objectives for today. So you know what we're going to do. First, we're going to tackle how to prepare for the RD exam. Then let's talk about how to manage that test anxiety, both before the exam and during your exam. After that, let's go over what do you anticipate and expect on your test day? What are the 8 types of common RD exam questions you may encounter on this exam? After that, let's go over how to tackle a multiple choice question exam. And lastly, we will try out 8 practice RD questions together to see how well you do.
And during those practice questions, we hope that you could bring in your participation and talk to us a little bit, but we'll get to that a little bit later. First and foremost, let's start with how to prepare for the RD exam. Now, many students approach us with this question because starting this process can feel really huge, really overwhelming. We have these three recommendations to get started, though. The first is you need to assess your current knowledge. What is your comfort level with the RD exam materials? You have to figure out what your strengths and your weaknesses are. And it's really easy to feel overwhelmed, like I said, because the four domains include a ton of information. So it's really vital for you to take this part seriously and be realistic about what it is you know. Do some really deep introspection here. Second, you're going to need to establish how much time it's going to take you to study for the RD exam. Now, for frame of reference, it took most of our students about 2 to 3 months to feel prepared to take it on. And on a personal level, I was about 3 months. I don't know about Jolene, you too, right? About 3 months?
I took about two and a half months, and then I took it at the 3 month mark.
Yeah, yeah. So like we said, though, it's going to be highly dependent on your personal circumstances. Are you a busy bee or do you have the luxury of time? It will take some students longer than others, and that is totally okay. So once you have a good grasp on this, pick that personal time frame and then pick your test date. This is going to be really vital to have that end goal. It's going to help keep you organized and keep you motivated to stay on track with your studies and have that test date kind of looming in the distance. Finally, we really recommend students create a study plan. This is probably the most important of the three recommendations here. Organization is going to be vital to your success for this test, really, truthfully. We recommend using either just your generic kind of calendar, or we created a free template to map out what you will study, when you will study, and then how much time you have for each domain. And then we also like to suggest setting aside about 2 weeks for what we call general review. And this time is really critical to go over materials again, things that you're not as confident with, but also to start making those important connections between the different domains. And the RD exam really likes to focus in on these things and see if you've made those connections. And then also memorizing your mnemonics, your formulas, and completing practice exams. Very important here. Try to incorporate about 2 to 3 practice exams into your schedule before the real deal so that you could get a feel of your pacing. So what we like to recommend is to compile about 145 questions. That's a maximum number of questions you could get on the exam. And then practice those within that 3-hour time frame that you now have. And gaining a sense of what the test will feel like will also help you with your anxiety down the line. And that's actually going to transition us very well into what Jolene is going to talk about next.
Right. Right. Now that you have a general idea on how to prepare for the RD exam, let's tackle test anxiety. All right. Our very first suggestion is to rest your brain, have scheduled study breaks. There is a lot of information to remember, and they're mostly hard memorization, right? It will feel overwhelming and multiple times during your study journey. So make sure you take good care of yourself and you have off days to not have to think about this RD exam at all. Our second tip is do not aim for perfection. It's true in life and it's true especially for this exam, right? Scoring a 26 or 36 is essentially the same outcome. A pass is a pass. You do not need to master every aspect of this exam. The key here is you just need to know enough to pass. Now, I really want to emphasize our third point here. Expect the unexpected. Students tend to freak out a little bit when they see materials they have no clue about, especially on the exam. This feeling of unknown tends to drive up that anxiety. So let's put our mind at ease here by accepting you're gonna see something you don't know, gonna accept that unknown possibility. This is especially true on your test day. There will be questions you have no clue about, and that is totally okay. Choose your best educated guess and move on. While you're taking the exam, your time is better spent on that materials and calculations you do have some knowledge about, right? But when you're studying at home and you're encountering RD exam questions you are unfamiliar with, that is a great time to figure out the logic and reasoning behind the question and the correct answer. That's when you have that luxury of time to figure it out. And here's what we recommend when you're trying out practice questions at home or with a study group. It is good to have everyone bring in 5 to 10 random RD exam questions to try them out together. This will allow you to get used to that feeling of solving questions you're unfamiliar with. Now, moving on to our fourth recommendation. Remember, the RD exam is just an exam. It does not define you as a student nor as an RD. So keep your positive mindset. Believe in your ability to do well. If the results aren't what you anticipated, don't beat yourself down. Use your score as a reference point, recalibrate, and try again, right? You have overcome other obstacles in life. You can certainly overcome this exam. Our last suggestion to combat test anxiety is to go to the test center a week before your exam on that same day around the same time. We can't stress this enough. Knowing where you're going, how long it takes you to get there through usual traffic, where to park, where the front door of that test center is prior to your test day will take a huge weight off of your shoulders. Taking this step to familiarize yourself with your surrounding for that test day will reduce the added stress of this unknown on the test day, right?
Yeah, I actually really love that last recommendation because for me personally, I remember there was a lot of construction that happened to be happening right around my test center. So I had to figure out how to get around that most efficiently. So if you have that already figured out a week before, you're going to be in a better place, believe me. So let's move on now to what you can actually expect on test day. Now, while some of you might have already experienced this, perhaps there are a few of you who have not. And getting a better sense of what to expect is going to help eliminate surprises and then once again reduce that stress of the unknown, which is what we were just talking about. So, what we like to tell students is expect to arrive about 1 hour early. Try to plan it out that way. There is a security checkpoint and a pat down before you enter the exam room. They're going to do things like fingerprint you, they're going to give you some paperwork to sign, and they're going to provide you with a locker to store all of your personal items because you can't bring any of that stuff with you into the exam room. Now, the second point here, and we also really stress this one, give yourself time to go to the bathroom before the exam starts. If you have to use the bathroom during your exam, the timer is gonna keep going. There isn't gonna be any kind of pause. So you're gonna have to leave the room, go to the bathroom, come back through security to be entered into the room again. It takes some time and it takes time away from your exam. So if you're anxious about pacing, make sure to use the bathroom before. Now, the next thing here is that supplies are going to be provided at the test site. They're going to provide you with things like earplugs, black marker, and a whiteboard, as well as an eraser. Um, Here's a big one. Ask for a physical calculator. The test site has to provide one for you. And in my personal case, I went in and they weren't even aware that I was allowed a physical calculator. They had to do the research to make sure that I was allowed one. Stay firm. You are allowed a physical calculator because the alternative is a little computer calculator on your test screen, which we just do not recommend. It is a bit finicky, takes longer to use. So get that physical calculator. You are allowed to have one. Now, the next thing, once you, oh, Sorry. The next thing is the pretest tutorial. Before your exam officially starts, there is a pretest tutorial. It's going to show you how all of the buttons work. It's going to give you the option for a count down or a count up timer on your screen. And then the exam is only going to officially start once you hit that start button. And it is once you hit that start button that we recommend taking a couple minutes to just write down formulas and mnemonics on that whiteboard. You can only do it once you click start, though, because they will ping you on this. And there are cameras, they are watching you. So be
Right.
mindful of this. Um, Take a minute or two, write down what you think is going to help you most, things that you might have a hard time just remembering off the top of your head. Those types of things will really help you down the line when you're taking your exam. And then at the end, once you've finished your exam, you're going to be taken to this post-test survey. It is mandatory to complete. Jolene and I have talked about this many times. I think we both said that we blacked out during this portion because we just knew what was coming, because right after you obtain your official test score. So I'm sure the types of questions they ask is just like your general experience during the exam, those sorts of things, but I have a very vague memory of what it actually entails. But
It
that is what
asks
you can expect.
questions. It asks questions about your test experience, how did the test site prepare you, and such. And there is
Yeah.
no skip button. You literally have to answer all of them before you can get your score. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind. As soon as you are done with your last question, the exam will jump you to a screen and tell you you finished. It won't tell you how well you did. It's just going to go straight to that post test survey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now that you know what to anticipate on your test day, let's go over the 8 type of questions you may see on the RD exam. Understanding the nature of these questions will really help you prepare more effectively. I will cover the first 4 types, and Zaza will take over and cover the last 4. All right, let's start. The first type of question is definition or fact based. This will quiz your general knowledge and it requires co-memorizations of concepts. These type of questions just need you to know the facts and know them really well. Our complete program has outlined a lot of these definition based knowledge in our worksheets. So, the process of filling out our worksheets and writing down lecture notes will really help you with memory recall during the exam. Next up, we have decision making questions. These are also sometimes called situational questions. They often present a clinical or counseling scenario where you need to make a choice based on your clinical judgment. You got to read that scenario carefully. Why? Because you got to consider your patient's conditions, preferences, and relevant clinical guidelines. What you got to do here is quickly weigh the pros and cons of each option and choose the one that aligns best with evidence based practice and that patient's well being. The third type is evaluation based. This type of question is testing your ability to build a connection with your patient or employee or your ability to better a program. So, you need to begin by asking open minded questions to gather that relevant information and establish a healthy rapport. Use validated assessment tools, if applicable, to gather objective data. If not, listen and watch your patient or employee closely for that nonverbal cues. All right, the fourth type of question centers around education and training. They typically involve providing nutrition information or counseling to patients or clients. What you got to do here is start by understanding the individual's needs, literacy level, and readiness to change. You got to tailor your response to that individual's level of understanding and learning style. Remember motivational interviewing techniques you learned in school? This is where that comes in.
Okay, perfect. All right, let me tackle the next 4 here. We'll start with the fifth type of question, which is community focused. And this is going to gauge your ability to assess needs, plan, implement, and evaluate nutrition programs in a community setting. That should sound pretty familiar to you at this point. So, what might happen is you might be asked to identify the current phase of program planning. Are you in the needs assessment? Are you in the goal setting stage, the intervention, the evaluation? And then the other thing is they might ask you, what is the appropriate next step? So, these questions are often testing your understanding of program planning principles and then also outcome measurements in some cases. Now, the next type of question, management questions, this covers a really broad range of topics, right? Managing food service operations could be one of them, also supervising staff, handling financial aspects, those sorts of things. There's also the dreaded management theories, which you need to know many. So we totally get you on that. Remembering the acronym PODC, that's going to be very helpful for you. Remember PODC, plan, organize, direct, control. This outlines the managerial functions. And we actually teach our management course following this guideline so that students can gain a sense of the story behind domain 3, which can be really hard to wrap your mind around in some ways. The other thing is there's this really big emphasis on participative management, where employees feel empowered, they feel responsible, and they are included in the decision-making process. That's really big. So when you're given a situational question, we recommend looking for options that promote that collaborative and supportive work environment. Now, the next type of question is our food service questions, and this can focus on more operational aspects. Think of things like menu planning and inventory control, quality assurance, those sorts of things. And these questions, more often than not, they require you to analyze situations, to identify the root of the problem, and then determine what the best solutions are. So, we tell students to not make the mistake of jumping in and providing a solution immediately. Try understanding and investigating the problem on hand. So, really focus and hone in on that investigation. And then finally, the last type of question is our calculation question, which is exactly what it sounds like. You may be asked to complete a variety of calculation questions, anything from calculating your tube feeds to having to use the prime method to figure out the best sales price of a meal, right? There's a ton of variety there. Each domain has different types of calculations that you need to know how to complete. And the key with calculation questions will be not only memorizing your formulas, but understanding what data you need from the question. The RD exam really loves to do this thing where they provide more information than necessary to trick students. Unfortunately, that is what they're doing. But if you memorize the formulas and you understand what you're trying to find, you should have no problem with these sorts of problems. Okay? These just require practice. They require a ton of practice.
Perfect. Now that we've covered the 8 common type of questions, let's go over our tips for multiple choice questions. By now, you already know the RD exam is all multiple choice questions, whether you get 125, the minimal amount, or you get the maximum amount, 145 questions. They're all multiple choice. This is great for someone who is good at standardized testing. But if you struggle with multiple choice or if you tend to overthink, here are our good 6 tips. Some of them you may already know, some you might not. These are great tips both when you're doing practice questions at home and during the actual exam. So let's go over them together. All right, the 5 tips. I misspoke. Let's make sure you understand process of elimination. If you are unsure about an answer, this process help you get rid of the choices you know that are definitely wrong, right? This will improve your odds even if you're not entirely sure of the correct answer. Now, if you absolutely don't know the answer to the question or you don't understand what the question is asking, don't linger too long on the exam day. Pick your best guess and move on. A good strategy to use in a situation like this is to keep picking the same option. Personally, if I don't understand the question at all and have no background knowledge, I just pick C and move on. You can certainly choose other options. The goal here is to use that time you have, that 3 hour, wisely distributed on questions and calculations you do have some knowledge about, right? The second tip here is read every option. This is especially true when you have a question with full of wordy choices, right? Even if you think you found the right answer early on, read through all your options before making your final selection. In fact, we recommend you read that question again to make sure you know what you're answering, right? Especially before you pick your final pick. This ensures you don't miss a better option. A good strategy for this is to use benchmark method. When you start reading these possible answer choices, find one that sounds correct and benchmark that answer as a possibility, right? Then you read through the rest thoroughly, comparing them to your benchmark answer to assess if if those answers are better or worse. Your benchmark answer will be correct unless another answer proves to be better. And if no other answer is better, then your benchmark choice is your final answer. Our third tip here is try to find key terms and key words in wordy question to help you narrow down the answer. When you have a wordy situational questions, you might be seeing 5 lines full of words. We recommend start by reading the final line on your screen. More often or not, that final line is the question they're asking. You read that first. That way, when you're going back and reading throughout the nitty gritty of the question, you already have a sense of what you are looking for, right? Next up, be aware and cautious of answer choices that include absolute words like always, never, all, or none. Often or not, these questions are incorrect because there are exceptions in many cases. Finally, our last tip here, do not overthink too much and second guess yourself on the exam day. You can do that when you're at home studying, but on that test day, excessively debating between two choices on one multiple choice question is often a waste of a time. On that test day, you either know it or you don't, right? Debating between two on one choice might not be the best way to spend your time. Furthermore, do not overthink your choice. Once you hit the next question, your time is better spent on solving the new question at hand than doubting your old choices. All right. Now that
Okay.
you have, oh, sorry, I jumped the slide. Now that you know our tips for multiple choice, why don't we start by trying out some questions together?
Yeah. We realized that was probably a lot to take in and not a lot of time. So deep breath here. Um, let's go over some practice questions. So, like we said earlier, we compiled about 8 of them to go over together. We're hoping that this part of our session can be a little bit more relaxed. We would love for you to comment your answer in the chat box if you would like, if you feel confident. We will also give you about 30 seconds to answer each question, and then we're going to go over it thoroughly together. All right, so let's go over this first question together. You're on a ski trip in the Swiss Alps and decide to bake a cake. You may need to tweak your recipe by A, increasing flour, liquid, and baking powder, B, increasing flour, liquid, and baking temperature, C, decreasing flour, sugar, and fat, or D, decreasing liquid, sugar, and baking powder. So we'll give you about 30 seconds here.
When you figure out your best guess, feel free to type that in the chat so we can see what you choose. It's not scored for anyone, so let's just type it in and see what each people think. Nice.
Scared.
All right. We have some guesses here. Good job.
Perfect. Oh, excellent. You guys are all experts on this topic.
Good job. Very good.
All
All
right,
right.
let me hop in then to this explanation. B, but I'm not too confident. Okay, all right, well then let's go over it together. So this is a domain one food science question. To be able to answer this question, we need to understand our ingredients and what they contribute to a bake, as well as how these ingredients are going to be affected by that higher altitude. So remember that altitude affects baking because of the lower air pressure as well as the higher evaporation rate. So what I like to keep in mind is a pot of boiling water. At higher altitude, your water is going to be boiling at a lower temperature. However, if you're not about trying to think this all through on the spot, we also have a really great graphic for this to quickly remember how certain ingredients react at a higher altitude. So what we see here, we want to increase flour liquid and baking temperature, and we want to decrease sugar and leavening agents. Okay, so let's go down the line here. A, increasing flour, liquid, and baking powder. While we do want to increase flour and liquid, we do not want to increase baking powder. Now, if you want a quick reasoning for that, it's because the reduced air pressure allows that baking powder to work really well. So what would happen is if you increase the baking powder, it's going to blow up and then probably collapse your cake. So we don't want a cake to look like that. A is therefore not our answer here. B, increasing flour, liquid, and baking temperature. So based on our graphic here, if we want to look at it really quickly, that is the correct answer. So good job on all of you who answered B. If you want a little bit more background there, though, we want more flour to provide more structure and stability to a cake, and we want to prevent it from rising too quickly due to that higher altitude. And then we want the liquid because of the higher evaporation rate. And then the increased baking temp is because we want the baked good to set more quickly, also once again due to that higher evaporation rate. So this is likely the best answer, but let's benchmark it. Like Jolene was saying earlier, that's a really great method. And look at C and D just in case. Decreasing flour, sugar, and baking temperature. While we would want to decrease sugar, we wouldn't decrease flour or baking temp. So this is out. And then finally D, decreasing liquid, sugar, and baking powder. Would want to decrease sugar and baking powder, but we would want to increase that liquid. So D is out, and the best answer here is B, like everyone said. Good job. Thank you. All right, that brings us to our next question. Wernicke's encephalopathy, ataxia, and beriberi are signs of which deficiency? Is it A, riboflavin, B, niacin, C, thiamine, or D, pantothenic acid? Awesome, you guys. Okay, this is exciting. Perfect. All right. All right, we got a good amount of answers here, and I'm seeing a lot of the correct things. So let's go through this. I'm really happy you guys are familiar with your vitamins and minerals because this is a very important one for this exam. So this is a very straightforward definition-based question. This is the type of question you should be able to answer at the drop of a pin. So I'm really happy that we're seeing some quick answers here. Let's go over the options though. So A, riboflavin. We should be familiar that the deficiencies involving riboflavin would be things like chelosis, angular stomatitis, magenta tongue. We like to think riboflavin, flavors of the mouth, so deficiency involving problems around the mouth, okay? And then there's also growth failure. That's rather common, none of which are in this particular question though, so A is out. B, niacin. That would be pellagra, remember the 4 Ds: diarrhea, dermatitis, dementia, death. We could also be looking at that beefy, bright red tongue. Once again, none of the answers here, so that is out. C, thiamine, which a lot of you answered is the correct answer. So an acute thiamine deficiency would lead to Wernicke's encephalopathy, which is that neurological disorder characterized by confusion and ocular abnormalities, as well as ataxia, which is also written up here. Ataxia is simply impaired balance or coordination. And then the chronic thiamine deficiency would lead to beriberi. So thiamine, definitely best answer by far here, but let's look at D just in case. Pantothenic acid deficiency could result in what's called paresthesia. Remember, it's the numbness and burning of hands and feet, as well as insomnia and nausea. Doesn't apply here, so C is by far the best answer. And like I said, this is the type of question you're really going to have to work on that quick recall. Vitamins and minerals are especially vital to know quickly on this exam. A lot of this is just foundation work for our MNT for later on as well. So take the time to really familiarize yourself with your vitamins and minerals. Okay. Great job, everyone. Let's move on to the next question now. Okay. Question 3. A 47-year-old female patient ate a sandwich from the hospital cafeteria 4 hours ago, and now she suddenly developed nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. She has no fever or chills. What is the most likely cause? You have 30 seconds to go for it.
I love that we have a variety of answers
Yeah,
here.
we have a
That's
variety
good.
this time. It's good.
Type in your best guess.
Means our first two were maybe too easy, Jolene.
Yeah.
Thought I'd be tripping people up with that elevation question. Okay. Is that about 30 seconds, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, let me keep going then. So we're seeing a variety of answers here. What we like to do here, this is a perfect example of finding key terms when you're reading through a question. So things like 4 hours, the symptoms of nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, those things should really be popping out at you. So should no fever or chills, okay? So the fact that the symptoms showed up within 4 hours of the food being consumed indicates that we're likely working with a bacteria that would cause a foodborne intoxication. So there are 4 common bacteria we need to know that would lead to this, including Staph aureus, Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium perfringens, as well as Bacillus cereus. So if we look at our answer choices here, we can eliminate D, Listeria monocytogenes, because that would cause a foodborne infection. So we could just get rid of that right off the bat. Process of elimination starts now. Now let's look at the other options. We have A, Staph aureus. The nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, as well as no fever, strongly points to Staph aureus being the correct answer. But then also, Staph aureus is known to have the fastest onset of symptoms, and 4 hours is very fast in this case. This is likely the correct answer, so we're going to benchmark it. We're going to look at the other two just in case. B, Clostridium botulinum. Now, things you would need to look out for here include dizziness, that blurred vision, the difficulty speaking or swallowing, none of which are really mentioned here, so it's probably not the best answer. And then if you know this as well, the onset of symptoms typically occurs within 12 to 36 hours for Clostridium botulinum, so B is probably not our answer here. And then C, Clostridium perfringens. I saw a few of you answered this, and you would be closer with this one for sure, because common symptoms for Clostridium perfringens includes things like intense abdominal cramping as well as diarrhea, which, ringing bells here, we're seeing diarrhea in the question, so it could potentially be this. But then the next thing you would need to know is the time, the onset time, which typically occurs within 8 to 22 hours. So 4 hours is a little too quick in this case. Probably not the likely culprit. A, Staph aureus is the best answer here. And we really go over all of these foodborne illnesses in our lecture 14 of our program. It's part of domain 4, as you all know. And there's a lot of information, as we've said multiple times now, that you need to memorize for this exam. It can be very challenging. We provide a really great worksheet for this one in particular to organize the information and help with that memorization process to be able to take in that vast amount of information and just store it in your brain. So it's there for use. Okay. Finally. Oh, you almost got me there. Okay. Question 4. You decided to buy a new dishwasher to improve the speed and efficiency of dishwashing in your facility. With the dishwasher, you purchased new dishwashing cleaning supplies and plates. What is the payback period? And you're given all of this great information and your possible answers here. About 30 seconds.
This is a
Hopefully,
great time to have that small
calculators.
calculator. Grab your phone, use that small calculator on there, and see what you get.
Yeah, we realized this one is going to take a little more time. So,
Okay, let's give
yeah.
everyone about 40 more seconds on this. I'm eyeing the clock, so I know when to let you know.
Okay, perfect. All right, maybe it was a little bit rough on us to provide a calculation question. We'll know that.
I think it's good to try these out because I
Yeah,
think if you're familiar with the formula,
yeah,
you
D.
might have
Okay.
a good answer how to attack it. 10 more seconds, and then let's get ready for explaining it.
Yeah. Good on you guys for finding a calculator on the fly.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. All right. Here we go then. So this is a very classic domain 4 calculation question. And for this, you need to know your food service formulas. In this case, you're going to have to remember that to find the payback period, you will need to divide the new costs by the amount of labor dollars saved per week. So you will typically be given the data for the costs of this new service, as shown here, as well as the labor hours and the money saved by having invested in that new service, also provided here. And then from there, you're going to complete the following calculation. Here we go. This is the thing I got worried about earlier. So the new costs we're given here include the new dishwasher, the dish soap, and the plates. And on top of that, we're given the labor hours saved. And note that we have thrown in this old dishwasher here. This cost we can completely ignore. This is the type of thing we were talking about earlier. They will throw in things like that. You will not need them for your calculation. It is just to throw you off. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's find the new cost first. So we're going to add up 13,500. That is the cost of the new dishwasher, plus the dishwashing soap, 870, plus 2,300 for those new plates. And you're going to get 16,670. That's the total of the new costs. It's going to go in your denominator in your formula afterwards. The second thing you're going to want to find is the money saved. So to do that, you're going to take the 7 hours saved per week, and you see that it's at $20 per hour. You're just going to do 7 hours per week times $20 per hour. It's going to give you $140 per week. That's going to go in your denominator. So you're going to divide those two things that you just calculated, 16,670 divided by 140, and you're going to get 119 weeks. So the answer here is D. Good job, everyone. And then I saw there was a question down there. We will get back to that at the end, if that is okay with you.
I think I saw the question. It's about the old dishwasher. That's not the sole price. That's the price they bought it at. But that's a good point.
It is.
You're only looking at how much you're currently purchasing, right? Not
Yes.
how much you purchased many, many moons ago. Okay. So let's go over to our next question. Question number 5. An employee returns to work after having a heartache that resulted in poor balance and is now having a hard time completing his job. What should the manager do? All right, take some time to read through each option here and type out your best guess. Nice. I'm seeing a flow of answers here, so I'm going to give 20 more seconds for everyone to have a chance to participate before I go over. Perfect. All right. I see a lot of people selected A. Let's go over them. All right. This is a domain 3 question, and it's asking you what should you do as a manager. So let's read through these options here. A, asking the employee to provide his physician's recommendation. This sounds pretty legit, right? Because remember, the employer has the ability to make reasonable accommodations for any disability and has the authority to request for a physician's note that support these accommodations. So let's benchmark A as a good option and read through the rest. B, ask the employee to do another job at a different department. This sounds less optimal, right? The employer can't just shuffle people around to another department without trying accommodations first. So B is not as good as A. C, fire in the employee in 1 month. Without any other context, firing the employee is obviously wrong because it's giving wrongful termination without any reasonable accommodations. So C is definitely wrong. D, hire another employee to do the work for him. This, from his perspective, it might sound pretty nice, but it's not the best answer here as a manager. If you hire another person to do the job of a third employee and the first employee, this can place an unfair burden on that employee to perform double the workload. So our benchmark answer A is still the best choice. So good job, everyone. Let's moving on to question number 6. Based on the graph below, at what volume of sales does this company achieve break even? Let's take a moment here to go through that graph and type out what you think is right. All right. Good job, everyone. I really appreciate the participation. It's good to try it out. This is a free test for you to put your best shot. Okay, I'm going to give 10 more seconds for everyone to participate, and then I will explain it in detail.
Man. You hear my dog, I apologize.
All right. I think I got a bunch of good answers here. This question is testing your knowledge of financial management in domain 3. Let's start with what break even means. Break even is a point which a company's revenue or sales is equal to its total cost. In our lecture 12, we went over the 3 ways to find break even point for a business. And when it comes to finding that break even point on a graph, you really need to see where the total sales equal to the total cost. And if you take a closer look on this graph, right, these 2 lines representing total sales and total cost intersect right here as circled. Since this question is asking you what is the volume of sales at break even, you need to look at the x-axis and determine the number, right? As you can see, this point is right between 20,000 and 30,000. So the correct answer here is C, 25,000. We did pretty well in the chat box, so good job, everyone. Let's go to our question number 7. All right. The director of dining has drawn a PERT chart for the special event at a long-term care facility. Based on the chart below, what is the minimal labor hour that's needed to complete the special event? Let's take a moment here, grab that calculator if you need, and type out your best guess in the chat box. All right, this is testing you about PERT chart. So I'm interested to know what you think. It takes a little bit calculation here. So I'm going to give everyone about 15 more seconds to go through it. I already see some response in the chat. Okay, last 5 seconds to drop down your answer before I go ahead and let's go over this question. All right. Okay, let me start by saying the correct answer is A. So this must be a tricky question for a lot of people, which is good. I put it here so that we can go over this concept together. This is a domain 4 question, testing your understanding of production scheduling. In order to solve it, you need to know how to read a PERT chart and what minimal labor hours even mean. Now, PERT is short for Program Evaluation and Review Technique. It is a project management tool in which the stages of projects are graphically represented on a chart. Let me start by first teaching you how to read this PERT chart. All right, a PERT chart uses circles called nodes like this to represent the project events or milestone. The straight line you see that links these nodes together, this is representing the nodes' dependency of each other. And the arrow you see represent the correct sequence. The time you see is the labor hour needed required to finish a specific task. For example, to go from node 1 to 2, you need 3 hours to complete task A, right? And similarly, to go from node 2 to 3, you will need 7 hours to finish task B. Now, you might also see the dashed line here. What does that mean? This is a limiting factor shown by a dashed line. An activity followed by a dashed line can only be started once the activity preceding the dashed line is fully completed. In other words, on this graph, task E and D cannot be started unless activity B, task B, is fully finished. Now, when a PERT chart is drawn, our goal is to look for the critical path, which is the longest path on the graph. Why is it important? Because it allows us to find that minimum labor hour needed to fully complete the whole project. In other words, a critical path is the longest journey in hours that's needed to go from start to finish, which is from node 1 all the way to node 6. Now, with all that information in mind, if you look at this PERT chart, what is the longest path from node 1 to node 6? To get that point, you actually have to calculate each of these potential paths, not just by visually seeing it, but actually putting your calculator to see What happens if I go from 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? And also because we know there's a limiting factor here, we have to finish B. So B has to be included in your calculation, right? So the longest path, once you've calculated every option, is actually going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and then to 6, right? The total time to finish task A, 3 hours, B, 7 hours, D, right here. Oh,
Yes.
and then F right here. Can you see my cursor by any chance?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. And F 10, right? You add them all up, you get 21 hours. So A is correct. All right, let's move on to our last question of the day, which is the most wordy of them all. Question number 8. 5-year-old Jeremy refuses to eat vegetables and throws a tantrum at mealtime. His parents decide to use the extinction method to eliminate his behavior. Which following strategy will match this behavior modification method? Take a moment here and drop down your answer in the chat.
Good job.
Really appreciate our participation here. This is our very last question.
And this is actually a great example of how sometimes just because a question is wordy, you don't need to immediately be afraid of it.
100%. All right, I'm going to give everyone 10 more seconds. I already see a good stream of answers coming in. This is a good example to show some questions doesn't take that long to answer, but some short ones, you read it once, but there's a lot of calculation needed. You might actually take longer. All right, let's tackle question 8 together, shall we? This is a domain 1 question, testing your understanding of educational theories. It is very wordy, so make sure you read each option carefully before you pick your answer. In order to solve this question, you have to know what extinction method is. It has another name, which is cry it out, meaning the parents will ignore unwanted behavior and withhold any rewards. This question, once again, if you read it, is asking you which of the 4 methods here is actually using extinction method to reduce that unwanted behavior. Let's start with A. Jeremy receiving a sticker for eating vegetables and his parents rewarding his good behavior here. Although this is a good strategy, it's also known as positive reinforcement. It is not using the extinction method. So A is out. B, Jeremy's dessert gets taken away for unwanted tantrums. This is using punishment to decrease unwanted behavior, also called negative punishment. Hence, this is also not using extinction method, and B is also out. C, Jeremy's parents ignoring his tantrum. Ooh, we see the word ignoring here. That is essentially letting him cry it out. So C is a good answer. And that is the correct answer for here. Please note that sometimes negative punishment and extinction method may sound pretty similar since they are both reducing unwanted behavior. However, they differ in the following ways. With punishment, we are removing pleasurable stimuli, right, as a act, as a reinforcement. That is not just ignoring. With extinction, we will ignore the tantrum and let that kid cry it out with no action here. So there's no reinforcement. You can see the difference, right? D, acting out how delicious vegetables are to Jeremy is definitely not letting him just cry it out. So C is our only correct answer. Well, that was a very good job for everyone who answers C.
And actually, we are about 2 minutes to the end. So let me just speed through this. If you like what you're seeing here, please check out our lecture packages for more practice questions. And the other thing we like to point out is we do have this free practice RD exam self-assessment tool. We highly recommend that students, especially those just kickstarting their studying journey, start out with something like this. Remember, we said earlier, assess your knowledge. This is going to be a great way to do that. And let's move on to the next slide here.
All
Perfect.
right. You can find us in all our lectures on preptable.org. Currently, our lecture 15, focusing on ENPN, is free and available to the public on our website. All you have to do is go to preptable.org and click under resources. We host all 15 of our lectures on a platform called Teachable. You have the option to purchase an individual domain package if you have more targeted learning needs. Or if you want to use us as a one-stop shop, you can try out our complete program, which allow you to have instant access to more than 630 RD exam practice questions all at once. And lastly, we're also on TikTok before TikTok gets banned,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We do RD exam tips and question of the day on there. It's a free resource for the public, so you are welcome to follow us there for more study tips.
All right. And we wanted to end this on a positive note, which is you can do this. So look back on what you've accomplished so far. You'll just realize this is one more hurdle to get through, and you have what it takes. You absolutely do. Now, I realize we're right at the end, but I do feel bad because we reached the end. So, Jolene, do you feel comfortable giving it another 5 minutes for
We can,
Q&A?
we can stay on 5 more minutes.
Okay, we're going to
I
stay
will
on
read
five
through
more
that
minutes. Stay
questions.
on 5 more minutes to answer any questions that you may have. Feel free to unmute your mic at this point and just have a conversation. And we'd just like to hear what you thought about this. If this was helpful, we would like to maybe host a few more of these in the future. If we get some positive feedback, then we will absolutely try to do this again
Yeah.
in the near future.
Like
You
Zaza
can-
said,
yeah.
this is our first time doing a public free session. So we just love to hear from you. Did you like this? What do you want to hear more? Do you want more practice questions, going over concepts together, going over what type of questions you may see on the RD exam? We like to be able to gather your interest and be able to make an even better session next time. And if you have longer questions or personal questions that you don't feel comfortable typing down on the chat box, you can always email us at team@preptable.org. We prioritize answering our students and aim to reply within 3 business days. And quick note, if you like to get notification about our next study session, you can subscribe directly on our website. All you have to do is go to preptable.org, scroll all the way to the end to put your email down, and we'll send a mass email to all the new subscriber about our next study session.
Okay, I'm looking
All
at some
right.
questions here. I was mentioned to write down formulas on the given whiteboard. I didn't catch if it was said if you're not allowed to. Yeah, so you're not allowed to write anything until you click the start button.
Yes.
So when you are ready to take your exam, you're taking that deep breath, you click the start button, and then you could write down some things on that whiteboard that's provided to you. If you do it beforehand, they can ping you on that, so just avoid that at all costs. Yeah,
All
it's a good
right.
question.
Any other
Uh,
questions that we can quickly answer in the chat box? I already see a lot of people have said they find this helpful. Once
okay.
again, thank you so much for your participation. I see practice questions with brief explanation were great. Okay, that's good to know. We thought
Yeah.
that would be popular. We put in some easier to answer ones and harder to answer ones just to see how you do. We haven't put anything super tricky that we have seen on the exam. So I think it would be good for us to combine a bunch. And once again, please check out our free knowledge assessment. It is a
Yeah.
50 question covering all 4 domains. And we already posted our explanation video on YouTube. Let me see if I can scroll back. We already posted explanation on YouTube for that. So all you have to do is go to our website, click under resource, free self-assessment tool, click open it. It's going to give you the PDF of a little girl that has all the questions and it have all the right answer in the end. And if you're wondering, I don't know why the right answer is C or D. Well, come to YouTube. We explained every single question and all the answer choices in detail. Both of these
We did
documents are
today.
free and ready to use on our website. All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up very soon. What do you think, Zaza?
Yeah, I think so. But thank you all once again so much for coming and for your support. We really appreciate you. And since this seems like something that was well received, look forward to getting a notification for another one coming up in the near future. Okay, guys?
All right.